Welcome to A Day in Her Life. I'm your host, Ellie Rinnick, and I am fascinated by how other women make their days work. Each week on A Day in Her Life, we get to chat with fantastic women about what their days look like and share some honest truths, tips, and tactics for how they make it all come together. Thank you so much for spending a part of a day in your life with A Day in Her Life. I'm just so glad you're here. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I am so excited for this week's episode with Mollie Buckler, COO of a small agriculture-focused nonprofit and mom living in Missouri. Listen in for how Mollie's career took a pivot from higher education to agriculture and how she makes time for herself when she travels, which is often for work travel. This conversation is so much fun, and I am so grateful that I had the chance to chat with Mollie. This week's Feel Good feature is your local food bank. Mollie suggested this, and what she said could not be said better. Working in agriculture combined with the fact that my husband works at our local food bank makes feeding our neighbors a cause that's close to my heart. Our local food bank covers 16 rural counties but feeds 80,000 people a month. Food banks rely not just on donations but volunteers. You can find and connect with your nearest food bank at feedingamerica.com. Thank you for sharing this, Mollie. And thank you for being here. If you're loving the podcast, please share it with a friend, drop a review, or follow us on Instagram at A Day in Her Life Pod. All right, let's have some fun. All right. Welcome to today's episode of A Day in Her Life podcast. I am thrilled to have Mollie Buckler joining us to discuss her days. Hi, Mollie. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Can you set the scene and fill us in on who you are, where you live, and what your family looks like?
Sure. So I live in Southeast Missouri, which most people are like, where is that if I mention my town? But I'm about halfway in between St. Louis and Memphis. I grew up in this area and moved away from college and thought I'd never come back. But here I am. My husband and I moved here 2.5 years ago when I accepted my now position. So I started as a coordinator, but I'm now COO of a small national agricultural nonprofit. And we have a 15-month-old son, and then we have a 7-year-old doodle named Bella, our first baby, of course.
The first and sometimes the neediest. I don't know about you,
oh my
but
gosh.
My 8-year-old doodle was up at 3 a.m. and I was like, dude, the kids are asleep. This isn't fair.
Yes.
So Mollie, let's go through a day. If you wouldn't mind, can you fill us in on how your mornings start? I think you said you have a specific day, so take us through it. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. And some backup too before I go into my hour by hour. So my job and schedule are pretty unique because I work from home, but I also travel quite a bit depending on the season. And so I don't see a lot of similar setups to mine, which is part of the reason I reached out to you, because I just have this really wild schedule. So what I'm going to take you through is a day at home where I am working at home and have time to sit down and work and make dinner and that kind of stuff. But my team has a lot of meetings, especially January and February, because that's when farmers have the time to meet, right? So farmers start planting in like March, April. And so we try to squeeze all of these activities and meetings in January and February. So like tomorrow I'm leaving for New Orleans at 4 a.m. for a one-day trip. I think I have a trip almost every week for the next 7-ish weeks. This was the calm before the storm.
I'd love to know, are your trips usually like 1 to 2 days, or when you travel, is it usually all week, or how does that look for you?
So it's all over the place. I'd say they average 3-ish nights. This one will be super short. So I'm going in the morning, I'm staying the night, and then coming back Wednesday night. But then in a couple weeks, I'm going to DC like Sunday through Thursday, and then I'm going straight to Houston for the rest of that weekend. And so that's going to be really long. But my husband is great. We also, I live in the same town as my parents. I have huge amount of family support, especially from my mom. And my husband's mom lives 5 hours away, but she's retired, and she'll come help on those weeks that I'm gone a lot too. So That's have awesome. A whole village. Yeah.
I used to do a lot of the every week travel pre-kids, and the logistics post-kids are just so much more.
Yes, definitely. Even for the one night, right? Like I will try to set my husband up for success tonight so that he doesn't have to worry about getting the bag together while he's corralling the baby in the morning and that kind of thing. But
awesome. Let's hear about your day.
yes, my little boy goes to daycare 4 days a week. One day a week, he goes to a family friend's house. Childcare, I could do like a whole podcast episode, I feel like, on childcare and the lack thereof, but it took us a really long time to find consistent childcare. We had family and friends helping us for the better part of the first year of his life, but he now goes to a Catholic school about 30 minutes away that has early childcare. So when I'm home, I'm the default in terms of drop off and pick up. If I want to start dinner earlier, I'll see if my husband will pick him up, and so I can get dinner started while they're on the road. But I try to leave by about 7:30 with him. And so I have a ton of podcasts and audiobook time on my schedule when I'm home like that. So I'll take him to school. I will usually listen to Up First, NPR's daily news podcast, and then I'll come back home or come back to my town and go to the coffee shop. I have a great local coffee shop, and I love to work there for a couple hours in the morning. I also have this is my office that I'm in right now. It's fantastic. But in the morning, I just feel so much more productive if I go to the coffee shop for a little bit. It helps me like jumpstart. I went to the coffee shop for actually like 2 hours, I would say. And then I went and worked out. I just go to my local Y and for the most part do strength training. I also have kind of a caveat of, because my schedule overall is so crazy and up and down, I have huge flexibility in it when I am home, which I'm super grateful for. So I can go work out at 10:30, or like you'll see a little later in the afternoon, I went and got my nails done, and it's not the end of the world, right? That I did 2 quote personal things in one day, like maybe it would have been in some of my more super schedule structured jobs where I was sitting in an office. But I went work out. I came home, ate lunch, worked some more. I think this day I had just like a salad and turkey cut up, like one of those Taylor Farms bags, like everything salad bags. We have lots of leftovers around here, but worked a little bit more. And then I went and got my nails done, came home and worked a little more for about 2 more hours. And then picked up my son, or left to pick up my son. I try to leave at 4. So daycare closes at 5, takes me about 25, 30 minutes to get there. If I can help it, I don't want to be like flying in at 5 p.m. And so I left to pick him up. I did start dinner. I think at some point during that day, we had chicken enchiladas that night. So like I prepped the chicken in the crock pot. That is also another reason, though, that I like to go to the coffee shop or somewhere else, because when I'm here, I'm like, oh, I'll just start dinner real quick. Oh, I'll wash that load of laundry. Oh, I'll do this. And so I will get myself off track with quote productive things, but I need to be working, not doing home things right now. Anyways, my son is a super early eater. He wants to eat about 5:30, or he is hangry. And we ate very quickly. And then the way we've been doing it is my husband takes bath duty while I clean up dinner. So I'll clean up, put away leftovers, that kind of thing. And he'll give the baby a bath. And then we tag team it until bedtime. We start reading about 6:30 or so. And he has a ton of opinions about what he wants to read already at 15 months old. We love tractors and trucks, and we read Goodnight Tractor over and over again. But he's usually in bed by 7 or asleep at 7. And then from there, I really try not to do anything super productive after he goes to bed. I try to just use that 7 to 10 time as me time. I will read. I love the whole New York Times games app. So I do Wordle and Connections in the morning. My husband and I both do. One of us will text the other our scores for the day. And then I'll do the crosswords at night and spelling bee at night. And that's just been nice. I've only been doing that in the last couple of months, but it's a little less time to scroll. It's like an hour that I'm not just on my phone, so that's been nice. But yeah, and then I'll read. I listen. I usually have 2 books going, an audiobook and a Kindle or hard copy book. And so I listen to my audiobook to fall asleep. And once I realize I'm like haven't been listening. I'll turn it off and fall asleep about 10:30 or so.
What are you reading right now?
So I just finished When Women Were Dragons last night. Have you heard of that book? I had not. And actually, it may have been on Liz Lidgett's Instagram that I saw it on her favorite books. I think I mentioned to you, I don't know Liz personally, but she is a fellow Mizzou alum, and I've always loved to follow her. And I heard her on this podcast before. I think she may have been how I started listening. But When Women Were Dragons, it has lessons in chemistry vibes. It's set in the 1950s, and there is this mass dragoning in 1955 where all these wives and mothers like spontaneously turn into dragons. Ooh. And it follows one family and one girl. So it's kind of a coming of age story. She was like 8 or 9 when it happened. And then it follows her into young adulthood. And it was good. I liked it a lot. 4 stars out of 5.
That's awesome. I'll have to add that to my list. One of the books that she shared recently, I just read called Come As You Are. It's a nonfiction book about like female sexuality. And it was fascinating. And the way that the author wrote made it really interesting. And so would recommend. I listened to it on audiobook, which was fun because the author narrates it. So I always enjoy that.
Yes.
One thing I had a question about for your days is what time do you get up in relation to when you bring your son to school? Are you an early riser? Are you a right before the bullet?
I am not an early riser. I really wish I was. And right now I get up not either. And his schedule is changing too. So like he was getting up at 5:30, 5:45, and my husband would get up with him, and then they would let me sleep, and I would wake up at 6:45 or 7, which I'm very appreciative of. But lately, the last like week or so, he's been sleeping till 6:45. And so I just get up with him and then we're out the door by 7:30. So that is one, like I will sometimes have meetings or things where I need to be like dressed for the day, but otherwise I'm really just in athleisure, or I'll come back and get dressed after I drop him off. I used to be an early riser. Yeah, I used to. We lived in Columbia, Missouri before we moved here, and I went to 5:30 a.m. workout classes for years, literally years. And now I'm like, I'm struggling I want to be back in that routine. Like I did it forever. Why can't I do it now? But yeah, right now, just when he gets up.
Yeah, I feel you. Also, I'm not one to get dressed before they get out the door because I'm going to end up with like syrup on me at some point.
Right.
Yeah. I love that you work in a coffee shop because that's something that I love to do as well. How do you structure your days when you can? Like when you're working from home, do you tend to front load admin? Do you front load your one-on-ones, or how do you plan your schedule, or do you have any control over that?
Yeah, I have quite a bit of control. I do have a small team. The rest of them are in Houston. And so we meet once a week via Zoom. I will see them, especially in these heavier travel times. I'll feel like I see them all the time, but then I'll go months without seeing them too. But we meet once a week. I really do best when I block my day and it's not necessarily I think putting creative stuff in the morning or harder stuff, those like bigger projects, I'll try to do in the morning. I do feel like I'm fresher in the morning to work on that kind of stuff. But really, it's more so just me being able to look at my calendar and say, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now, because I will just get off on a million different little tangents, or I'll be stuck in my email and responding to fires when I have longer term stuff I need to be working on. So that really helps me, even if I feel like I'm still learning, constantly learning, like how long it takes me to actually do stuff, right? That's the trick of being able to block your calendar like that. But when I'm thriving, that is what I'm doing. Is I'm at the end of the day, I'm looking at what needs to be done and putting those into my calendar and putting reminders to call people into my calendar, so I don't let the ball drop in that way.
Awesome. And would you mind sharing with us how you got into agriculture in general?
Yeah. Before we started recording, I know I said it was quite the leap. So I've been in this role. I've been working in ag for 2.5 years now. And before that, I worked in higher ed and worked in higher ed for a decade plus. I had my master's in higher education administration. I Worked my first job out of school. I'm a two-time Mizzou grad, but first job out of school was at the University of Alabama. And then I moved back to Mizzou and worked at Mizzou Alumni Association for several years. So yeah, that's where I was like building my career, right? And then I do have farmers in my family, and where I live is very heavily ag focused. And actually, my uncle, my dad's brother, knew of this job coming up and was like, "Hey, I think you'd be good at this." And he knew it was work from home, but I thought that meant work from home in Columbia, not in Southeast Missouri. And so I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready for a change. I'll apply for it." And looking back, I don't think I would have had I known I was going to have to move, but I started the conversations and started interviewing, and it quickly became obvious that I was going to have to move back to the area, not necessarily to my hometown, but somewhere in the 2-hour vicinity. And we just really thought hard about it and prayed about it, and we took the leap. So we didn't have kids yet. We knew that we wanted to soon. And so it was a plus to know that we'd have grandparents super close and that kind of thing. But it really was a leap. And so I started as a coordinator for this area with my organization, and then was promoted really about the time I had my son. It all happened at the same time about 15 months ago. But I really love working in the ag space. So I get to do both domestic and international works. On the domestic side, doing kind of domestic promotions, working with other state ag organizations, our state government, that kind of thing. And then on the international side, we receive funding from the USDA to do international promotions and host what are called trade servicing trips, where we'll either go to a different country to promote our commodity, or bring people here to help them tour the industry and meet with producers and exporters and that kind of thing. My days literally are never the same. One minute I'm like on a farm in Southeast Missouri, and the next I'm going to a Latin American country for a trade mission. So it's really cool, and I've really thrived. It was a huge leap of faith, but it was worth it.
That's awesome. And that's so cool that there's such a variety in your day, both internationally and within the US, and then also just being able to be closer to home too.
Exactly. So I say I get the best of both worlds, because yeah, I come home to small town Southeast Missouri, population 17,000, but I travel the country, I get to travel the world, and also have that family support while I do it. So it's really cool.
That's awesome. How do you stay organized? What are your organizational tools that you use for both work and for your family?
So I am very much an Outlook person. I've always been a planner person, and I have bought just about any planner you can think of, but just really for simplicity. And my husband uses Outlook. That's where everything really lives for the most part. And we invite each other to things as little as, we'll call our Friday night date marriage meeting, and we'll put that on the calendar, but also to let him know, hey, I'm going to be out of town this chunk of time, or what have you. And then we also have a big, cute dry erase calendar, like in our hallway, where we put the banner things of just being able to look really quickly and not have to pull up your phone. But definitely my calendar. I'm also a huge notebook person, brain dump person, but then it's getting those lists into my calendar or into it. We just started using Asana as a team, and I've been loving it. Or so into Asana. Definitely online, as much as my paper loving heart would love to say that I have this big, pretty paper planner.
Awesome. What do you do how do you make time for creativity in your day? So what are some ways that you exercise your creative brain?
This question felt harder for me, I think, than the rest of the questions on the list, because I don't necessarily think of myself as a creative, right? But I definitely have to use creativity in various parts of my job to some extent. Working in ag doesn't really sound creative, but I have to come up with ideas for promotional programs, right? That we're proposing every year to the USDA, or ordering promo items and designing them, or designing graphics and that kind of stuff. I write a lot for my job as well, and have always loved writing. I went to Mizzou as a journalism major, just knew that was what I was going to do. And then quickly realized that was not for me. So I actually ended up studying classics in undergrad, but knew that I wanted to go to grad school or law school or something like that. But it was a great foundation. And then the more I think about it, I mentioned I love reading. I really have gotten into fantasy over the last couple years. And I think it's because I just want something completely different than the real world and just somewhere I could let my imagination run. So all of those popular fantasy books right now, the Sarah J. Maas series, Fourth Wing, I have really loved and never imagined I would.
Totally. Are you excited for the next Crescent City coming out at the end of the month? Because I am.
I haven't read Crescent City. I want to. I've read A Court of Thorns and Roses, the whole series, and then I've read Throne of Glass up to book 4-ish. And then I gave up while I was pregnant. And so it's been so long that I'm just going to start over. So I just read the first 2 again. I'm about to listen to the third one, but I really love them.
I would definitely read. I liked, in order of like preference, I actually think I liked Crescent City maybe more than A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Yeah. And it's like present day-ish, right?
Ish.
Okay.
I think you'll enjoy it. I don't want to give anything away, but it's really good. And this is the third book. The third book comes out January 30th. And so I'm planning to reread the first 2 before the third comes out so that I can be like right up to speed. I just re-listened to all of the Court of Thorns and Roses this past fall because it had been a while. So I was excited to get back into it. What do you do during the day for yourself? Or what are some things that you try to prioritize to keep you happy?
Definitely working out, number one. And that's been true for me for the better part of a decade plus. Before we moved back to my hometown, I went to lots of studio classes. So Pure Barre, another kind of Orange Theory-ish, but like local class. And then when we moved here, I did not have those options, just joined my local Y and got into strength training on my own. And I really love it. I follow Jordan Lips. He has a program through the Train Heroic app that I follow. So I don't have to think about anything. I just go in, follow that. It's 8 weeks at a time. And I've really liked that. And then the second thing I would say is that kind of do nothing time from 7 to 10 p.m. every night. The most I will do at that time is like fold laundry. But other than that, once the kitchen is put away for the night and closed, I really try to just hang out and relax and let my mind rest for a little bit.
That's awesome. When you travel, how do you prioritize your you time, or how does that time look different for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I do think it helps. Traveling is by no means a vacation, right? Traveling for work. And I went on a girls' trip in October and was quickly reminded that. Like, I think that sometimes I'm like, oh, I get to sleep and be alone in a hotel room by myself. And that's really nice. But I think my husband thinks that too sometimes. Oh, she gets to go off on her own, but it's not quite a vacation. And it doesn't matter what time I get in. If it's late, I have to sit there and recoup. I will try to work out when I'm traveling, but it just depends on the schedule and the gym setup and that kind of thing. I went to a conference in Maryland in November and I walked in the gym and all of their strength training stuff, all of their machines were the exact same machines I have here, like at my home gym. And it was like a special moment. I had no idea I would have been so excited for, right? Like I knew exactly what to do. I love when there's a Peloton in a hotel gym because I don't really want to invest in one myself. Like cardio is just not quite my thing, but I love being able to use one when I'm traveling. And lots of times there is one in the hotel gym. So I still have that kind of routine, whether it's 8 p.m. or 11 p.m. in a hotel room. I'm going to play my games. I'm going to read. I'm going to listen to my audiobook and then work out if I can.
That's awesome. So how do you make time for relationships with your friends during a given week or period of time?
So this is tricky because number one, my closest friends are scattered all throughout the country now. My two best friends from college, one's in DC, one's in Austin. I have two good friends in Alabama, I have one in Columbia. But I really prioritize those relationships even still. So I text with those people throughout the week, and they're all kind of different groups. It's two and two and one, but I really unspokenly, but like in my mind, try to make it a point to see all of them at least once a year. And so whether that is going to them, and like I went to a Mizzou game and saw the Columbia person a few months ago. I went on the girls trip to Mexico with a couple of them. One lives in DC, and I luckily travel to DC at least 3 times a year for work. So I feel like I'm seeing her pretty often, that kind of thing. Finding community, like moving back and finding community in our small town, especially as a couple, as a married couple, has been super hard, more so than I thought it would be. We belong to a church and serve there, and I have a book club that I'm part of. But in a small town, it's very easy to know everyone, but not feel known, if that makes sense. Stay surface level, even if there's people that I'm like, oh, I want to know you better. And for time or whatever reason, if I was single and didn't have kids, like I would have just dove right in, but it's hard to find that time. I remember other moms saying that before I became a mom, and I was, yeah, sure. But it's one of those things, once I became a mom, I was like, oh, yes, I get it.
Yeah, it is really hard. We moved here 3 years ago, and it's taken a while to meet people and build that community. And I feel like as your kid progresses in school, you like gain some traction, but it's still not,
and that's
like
what everybody says.
Yeah. But it's still, you need it more when they're little and like they're really hard. So
Yes.
I totally understand that. How do you and your husband make time for your relationship? I love your marriage meeting ideas, but how else do you guys prioritize your relationship?
Yeah, so that's another one that has definitely changed since the baby has come along, because pre-baby, we were like Friday night date night every week, and we go somewhere super cool and eat dinner and in our fun little, especially when we lived in Columbia and had tons of restaurant options and stuff. But in small town Southeast Missouri, and with a 15-month-old, that's a little harder. So I still feel like we make it a point to go out to dinner probably like once a month. And otherwise, yes, we will do that kind of marriage meeting on Friday evenings, get a bottle of wine when the baby goes to sleep. When it's nice, we have a nice screened-in porch with a little fireplace table or fire pit table, and we'll sit out there. But it's super easy, I think, for us to fall into like roommate mode and logistics. And especially with my travel, right? There are so many logistics going on constantly. And that's both a point we can talk about those logistics, but also talk about other stuff too. So we really try to keep that on the front of our minds. And then another thing that we've done, I think since maybe 2018, is this is just a once a year thing, but we have an end of the year dinner where we used to go on New Year's Eve. That doesn't quite work for us anymore, but we'll just go to dinner. This year we did a day date, and we had 2 gift cards that we've had for 3 years to Olive Garden. So we went to Olive Garden and we went to Barnes and Noble, but we have these like end of the year questions that we just go through together and dream together and think about what we want for the next year. And that's really fun to always look forward to it.
That's really cool. Right now, what are some things that you are outsourcing in your days? So grocery shopping, childcare obviously fits in there, but is there anything else that you're currently outsourcing?
Yeah. So I take care of, I'm the primary cook. I meal plan and do Walmart pickup, because that is pretty much the option that we have, but do that for the most part when I'm here. But cleaning definitely gets outsourced. For almost the last year, we've had somebody come once a month, and that has been such a huge help. I wish you could come more than that, but my husband is the primary budget person of our household, and I don't think he would prefer that. They come once a month. And then laundry wise, so I'm in charge of my laundry and my son's laundry, but When we first got married, I didn't ever start doing my husband's laundry like regularly. Every once in a while I would, and I still will every once in a while, but largely he is in charge of his laundry. And
Mhm.
so I am not the head laundry person in our house aside from we just take care of our own, and I take care of the babies, and that has worked for us. And it's a pleasant surprise if I add his to the mix, but it's one less thing I have to worry about.
My husband tried to do my laundry once and washed a cashmere sweater. And I was like, all right, we are never sharing this
Yep.
responsibility again. And recently
Exactly.
I find that because I work from home, I have the ability to put away laundry. And my husband doesn't mind the doing and the folding. And I find folding to be a demotivator for me.
Yes.
And so
Hmm.
what's been working for us recently, we just started this, is that I don't even know if it's like a system, but like I'm enforcing it. And he doesn't even listen. So he won't know that I'm routing him in this direction. But he will wash and fold the laundry and then I put it away. And I like totally fine with that. And it's making my life much easier.
Yes. Yeah.
I
That's awesome.
And I also won't touch his laundry because I'm like, you dry things on the rack and I don't care enough to dry things on a rack.
And I do all my workout clothes separately and hang all those to dry. So I'm like, he would never know what to do anyways. But if he could just take care of his, and I think both of our moms were like, when we first got married, but I'm like, it's fine. Oh,
Everyone's fine.
we're
You're
both
raising a
adults
capable
already.
human to do their own laundry too eventually.
Exactly.
You're having him modeling the behavior you want your son to show. What are some hobbies that you have and how do you make time for them currently?
Definitely working out and reading. I also love to cook. And so I think that's part of why I've just completely owned meal planning and
Mhm.
cooking in our household. My husband does like to make breakfast, and I can take or leave breakfast at home. Like I like to go out for breakfast every once in a while, but I'm not gonna like he full on makes biscuits and gravy on a Sunday morning, and I'm just and it's fine. But dinner, I plan out and have this Google sheet that I've been using since we got married with hundreds of tabs now. But that's where I put our meals. And it is nice to like look back and be like, what did we eat on this week last year? Like when I'm stuck. But I meal plan what I can and love to cook, going back to hobbies, love to bake. Yeah, I think that's about it. I wish I had a fun, like creative hobby, but I guess benediction is a hobby as well. My Substack, I've had it since 2021. So I was like on the front end of Substack. I feel like it's exploded in the last year or so. But sometimes you can find me at benediction.substack.com. I say that because my posting's a little sporadic, but it's a place I enjoy being and would like to be more.
That's awesome. Where do you find recipes currently?
Oh gosh, all over the place. A lot on Instagram. I'm a huge Caro Chambers fan. I
Mhm.
subscribe to her Substack, and we just had her pasta alla vodka last week and it was so good.
The risotto
We I
alla vodka this week. That's on my
Oh,
She put it on
nice.
Instagram. That's one of the meals we have this week too.
Yeah, there's another Instagram account. I think her name is Sarah Francis Green on Instagram. I'm going to make sure. Yeah, sarah.francis.green. She has two littles and her recipes are just so simple but so good. I'm actually making her beef stroganoff tonight, and
Mhm.
we've had that a few times now, and it's super easy. My husband loves it. The baby loves it. That has been a whole new thing though, right? Of like things that are too
Yes.
spicy for a 15-month-old or that he will like, but then he doesn't eat anyways. Or so having to keep a third human fed all the time is no small feat.
I'll have to check her out.
Yes.
What is a ball that you are currently letting drop or something that's a conscious decision to deprioritize because it doesn't fit in your days right now or just not something that's a priority anymore?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was deep cleaning. Like that just is not part of my life right now. I do not do baseboards like I used to, although I am going through, I just bought last week Naptime Kitchen's house reset, where it's organizational tool with audio lessons and checklists, but it's more about making your house work for you than making it like pretty and, all the clear bins and stuff, but it's just time to clean out. I haven't done that since I was in like full nesting mode a couple of summers ago. So it's time. But the other thing that came to mind, which is newer, is I'm not setting 2024 goals in the same way that I have for years. For the past like 8 or 9 years, I've used Power Sheets. Have you heard of Power Sheets before? It's a goal setting planner. The company is Cultivate What Matters. And I've loved them. Obviously, I used them for 8 years, but it came time to buy them. They usually come out like October-ish each year. And I was just like, I don't think I want to do this year. Like, I'm just in such a different season right now. Like they served me so well, and I got a lot accomplished in a lot of different areas of my life with them. But I think rather than sitting down and doing some year-long plan right now, I am just going to focus on one quarter at a time. And that seems a lot less daunting to me. And a lot of times my work can be up in the air too, right? Like I might have a trip come up that I had no idea I'm going to go on, and it's January 8th and I'm going to go somewhere in April. That happened a couple of times last year. So I just want to keep my mind free from that to some extent and that pressure off of me. My 3 goals for Q1 are do the house reset. That's quite the undertaking. So just give myself the first few months of the year to do that. I want to add in a little more cardio because pretty much all I do is strength right now. And I just have felt like running a little bit lately, which I cannot believe I'm saying, but it just has sounded good and has felt good just to get a little more cardio in. And then, gosh, I don't even remember my third goal. Let me, the Bible recap, the most important one. I've been trying, like I mentioned, I listen to audiobooks and podcasts like constantly in morning and night on my drives. And obviously when I travel on the plane and then at night. And then last week I was just like, why don't I add listening to the Bible into that routine? Like I already have this really good routine going. And so I'm going to use the Bible recap to do that. And there's a really quick little 5 or 6 minute recap podcast episode with what you're supposed to read for the day. So it's pretty digestible, but I'm only going to commit to it for Q1. So
I love how you said that. And I think that makes a ton of sense it's also who knows what the next quarter, if anything, the last few years have taught me is who knows what the next quarter is going to look like. If it's going to,
exactly.
Things will change.
If that is not the case for others, like I love resolutions and goal setting and stuff like that. And so I'm never one to like poo-poo that by any means. But if you have year-long goals, that is fantastic. But just for me right now, that's not my current situation.
Absolutely. What if you could change something about the structure of your days or how your days are going, something randomly, if you had a magic 8-ball and could change something, what would you change right now?
The easiest one would be to work out at 5:30 in the morning and not try to fit it in wherever I can. Because sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And so if I would just go, and my husband does, so he goes 2 days a week to CrossFit. And so I could have the other 3 mornings just fine. But I just like sleeping, apparently, just cannot figure it out. Even this morning, I set my alarm, but then my husband had like food poisoning overnight. And I was like, I'm not going to make him get up with the baby this morning. So I didn't go. And then other than that, to some extent, I wish I knew what was coming. Like I was saying, there may be trips coming up that I have no idea about. I wish that I could have, and that's just a control thing, right? I just wish I knew a little more of my even 3-month schedule, but that's just the element of this job. So that's okay.
Awesome. And then what is something that you are obsessed with recently? So something that's really making your days fun or something really small, could be minor, that's making you really excited.
Oh man, I think it is. So when I had my son, my friend Alex got me one of those like Kindle holders and clickers.
Ooh.
And I used the clicker, but I just used the holder for the first time last week. Sorry, Alex, if you're listening to this. I never used it while I was feeding. It just never became part of my routine. But I attached it to my bedside and just lay there with my arms all cuddled up and read my Kindle. It's fantastic. Other than that, I also really, this is a obsession that I feel like I haven't heard that many people talk about, which is this A313 retinol. I got it off Amazon, and it's like a French pharmaceutical company retinol, but I love it. It works really well. It's $20, I think. It's not super expensive. I use it like twice a week, and I definitely feel like I've seen results from it. It's a little goopy, like it's a little gluey going on, but I always feel like my skin is smoother when I wake up in the morning when I use it.
I'll have to check that one out. Awesome. Yeah. So Mollie, where can people learn more about you and follow you?
So I am on Instagram at Mollie L. Buckler, and then again at benediction.substack.com. So like I said, I started Benediction in 2021, and I started it with it. The tagline of it is a collection of good things to end one week and begin the next. And I send it on Sunday mornings when I do send it. And there's usually like a little essay, and then what I'm eating, what I'm reading, what I'm loving. And those are my usual 3 categories. But I hope to post more there in 2024 and be there in 2024. But you can always find me on Instagram at Mollie L. Buckler.
Awesome. And then Mollie, what is your favorite part of a day in your life?
I think it's the very beginning of the day and the very end of the day. So at the very beginning of the day, my son is in such a good mood when he wakes up. He's so sweet. And like I said, I get my best work done in the morning. So I am a morning person once I get my butt out of bed. But then I would be lying if I said I didn't love those couple hours at night where he's down for the night and my husband and I are just hanging out, and I'm doing my New York Times games and maybe drinking a glass of wine. Yes, when I'm home, those are my favorite parts of the day.
I love that. Mollie, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. It was so great to hear about your days.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of A Day in Her Life. I'm your host, Ellie Ridnick, and I am so glad that you're here. If you're loving the podcast, please share it with a friend, drop us a review on podcast or Spotify, and tag us on Instagram at A Day in Her Life Pod. If you have any feedback or guest suggestions, you can send me a message on Instagram or on our website, adayinherlife.com. Also, you can subscribe to our newsletter from our website or on Substack. Each week on Fridays, I share a newsletter with some things that I'm loving, some things that I'm eating and making for my family, and some things that past guests are doing out in the world. I would love for you to follow along.